Your reaction is so out of proportion to everything that just happened. You're making me switch sides here.
So the issue for me is that politics means very little. If the attitude everyone's going to have is, when the left cries, we answer. Why?
People are too focused on the schools on that. What is wokeness? It's anti-white racism plus cartoons of anal sex. That's basically...
Is there one issue that you think... I mean, I assume you're going to say immigration.
Of course, immigration. Of course, immigration, crime, transgenders. I mean, the wokeness stuff, and the one thing, if I could advise DeSantis, the one way I think he should modify the wokeness thing is it's not just about kindergartners. And I think...
Do you feel like this is something that the average American is aware of, or do you think that, inflation...
They know about it's the DIE bureaucracies. It's the race before merit thing. It's no longer deciding things on the basis of merit. It is the anti-white male hatred.
Tim Pool hosted Anne Coulter on Timcast for a live stream where Anne Coulter made explosive comments that completely stunned Tim Pool. Anne Coulter remarks not only caught Tim off guard, but also ignited a fiery debate among the entire panel. In this clip from Timcast, Anne Coulter's bold statements shake up the discussion, leading to a chaotic back and forth between Tim and his panel members. Let's dive into the moment that sparked all the controversy.
Or what gets independent voters this year? Is there one issue that you think... I mean, I assume you're going to say immigration.
Of course, immigration. Of course, immigration, crime, transgenders. I mean, the wokeness stuff, and the one thing, if I could advise DeSantis, the one way I think he should modify the wokeness thing is it's not just about kindergartners. And I think people are too focused on the schools on that. What is wokeness? It's anti-white racism plus cartoons of anal sex. That's basically the full panoply of what it's the DIE bureaucracies. It's the race before merit thing. It's no longer deciding things on the basis of merit. It is the anti-white male hatred
that Anne,
animates the left.
But you said earlier in this very discussion that white people are the only group that have been taught to hate themselves.
I think they do it on their own.
All right, they do it on their own, and maybe they're taught to do it. But how do you think then running a campaign appealing to white people and saying in effect that there's this anti-white ideology in the country, how is that going to be a winning technique?
Well, manifestly, I don't think. I mean, if all white people were liberals, oh, what a horrible, horrible thought. Then we wouldn't get a single
I'm saying
vote
working class white guys. Working class white guys.
They don't hate white people. No, the vast majority of white people don't hate themselves. There are enough in European countries. There are enough in this country to have suicidal immigration policies, to have suicidal hiring policies. If it were 100%, then literally you might as well go and commit suicide. Republicans would never win a single election. Nothing would happen anyplace. But no, that obviously Trump got elected one time by appealing to mostly working class whites who hadn't voted for a long, long time. But mostly, I just think it's true, the anti-white racism. I think it's true, and it's hurting everyone. I'm worried about, the pilots they're hiring. I'm worried about the air traffic controllers they're hiring. It's destroying all of our lives, and they're treating black people like they're children and patting them on the head when they're the shoplifting and the carjacking. But I would make the wokeness anti-white racism, crime, and immigration.
What are you? What do you think are getting independents in particular to the polls?
I think that we just run a scorched earth campaign against Biden and what the Biden regime is doing. And
so what are the Biden regime's three biggest sins?
Well, its biggest sin now is a wholesale assault on the basic liberty of Americans. I mean, when I came to America in the 70s, I was a teenager, and there was a big political debate going on. But one of the things that really consoled me or relieved me about America, I'm like, look, there are certain basic rights. They're right there in the Bill of Rights. It's not a full compendium of our rights, but right to free speech, right to conscience, right to assemble. You can petition the government without fear for grievances, equal justice under the law. And I'm like, this is not up for political negotiation. It doesn't matter if 90% of people don't agree with me, they can't shut me up, right? So now we fast forward to now, and I say that within 2 or 3 years, all these basic rights, every single one of them, is in serious jeopardy. I'm not even sure with a straight face I could say that we are, in a pure sense, a free country anymore. Think of what the defining characteristics of tyrannical regimes are. Let's take North Korea, China, or the old Soviet Union. Mass surveillance of citizens, systematic censorship, wholesale indoctrination in the schools and the media, a one-party state. Police states are one-party states. They shut down the opposition. Doesn't mean they don't have elections. Iran has elections. China has elections, but it's a controlled opposition that's subordinate to the regime. Political prisoners, criminalization of dissent. And I say, wow, we have all that right now in this country. So that's the point of making a movie called...
Often when people bring up points like these, others dismiss them as exaggerations or conspiracy theories. But the reality is, everything just mentioned is actually happening. People have had their bank accounts shut down simply for holding certain opinions. During the 2020 lockdowns, yes, Trump was president at the time, but we were still forced to stay inside, unable to work or go about our daily lives. If that's not a form of tyranny, then what is? Then there's the issue of political prisoners. Just look at how many times they've tried to imprison Donald Trump over various charges. Mass surveillance is also undeniable. We've seen evidence through Meta, with Mark Zuckerberg admitting to monitoring citizens, the Twitter files revealing censorship, and even recent concerns with Telegram's founder. With all this happening, it's hard to argue that we still live in a truly free country. What do you think? Let me know in the comments.
Is saying, we're not there yet. Obviously, if we were a full-fledged police state, I couldn't make this movie. I mean, I'd be locked up right now. But we are headed in with great speed and unexpected rapidity toward a country in which none of our rights anymore are safe.
Do you feel like this is something that the average American is aware of, or do you think that, inflation...
They know about January 6th.
Right. I was going to say, what issues distract people? It's not that I don't disagree with your point, but, when you are talking about voters, if you say your rights are being stripped away, is that more impactful to them than saying you can't pay for groceries this month because inflation is so high?
Well, it's not one or the other, right? I mean, just like you can run on the economy and you can run on the transgender issue. One doesn't contradict the other, but I think you have to. I mean, the reason to make a film is to do a wake-up call for people who are not woken up, right? If they were already woken up, the film is, in a sense, pointless. I kind of feel like the animal who's, sees the predator in the trees. I'm trying to warn the herd. But the ordinary guy is saying, no. The ordinary guy goes, I'm not Trump. And, I didn't go in the Capitol on January 6th. And I pay my taxes. So, I'm never going to have the FBI come smashing through my door. And my point is, you could not be more wrong.
Sure.
Because this thing has devolved very quickly in a short time.
Although it's awful what was done to the January 6th protesters, and people should know about it, certainly people who watch this podcast and be annoyed by it. By and large, I would avoid bringing up January 6th. I wrote a book on mobs, demonic. They're always, always dangerous. It's the French Revolution versus the American Revolution. And when I wrote that book, and up until January 6th, I could say, without fear of contradiction, there has never been a right-wing mob. And January 6th, I understand why people thought it was Antifa at first. I understand why the Capitol policeman said, no, we don't need, or I don't know, Nancy Pelosi, the rest of them, they weren't bringing in. There hadn't been a right-wing mob before, and now there's finally been one, and we're all going to be in the nursing home someday, and they're still going to be talking about January 6th. Mm-hmm. It does not reflect well on us. They were idiots. They shouldn't have gone to prison for 2 life terms and so on and so forth. What was done to Enrique Tarrio, absolutely outrageous, but generally, I'd avoid talking about it.
Why be so deferential to the left?
Because I don't think it helps us for people to remember what happened on January 6th. I think that scares independents. I think it scares suburban moms. I think it pisses off a lot of Republicans. I mean, it kind of pisses me off. Both sides, that they did it. And then the wild, crazy overreaction. I mean, my last book was Resistance is Futile. And the point of it was, we're never, ever going to get away from it. Trump does something dumb. And then the left has such a crazy overreaction. I end up coming to his defense. No, he said something dumb, but he didn't kill 3 nuns. No MSNBC. He didn't nail a kitten to church doors. And they keep overreacting and forcing me to defend whether it's Trump or the January 6th people, your reaction is so out of proportion to everything that just happened. You're making me switch sides here.
So the issue for me is that politics means very little if the attitude everyone's going to have is when the left cries, we answer. Why? If they come out and they're like, Trump said a naughty word, I'll say, you're a moron, have a nice day.
Yes.
The stories you're putting forward are meaningless to me.
Yes.
It's every single time there's a story that if something happens, and let's say there's a story that Andy No tweeted about. A swastika appeared on some cars in a black neighborhood. The left went nuts, started screaming about it. Turns out it was a black man who did it. And then it's gone. Yeah. So
Exactly.
if the anti-establishment forces, conservatives, the right, libertarians, do not put all of their energy into cultural domination, it's pointless, because the conversation we end up having is Donald Trump said a thing that was innocuous and it became front page news, and we all must answer for it. No! Now it's start setting the news cycle. We need to set the we've been doing it quite a bit. I should say, I mean, we as an anti-establishment forces, calling out Joe Biden on Burisma and keeping Hunter Biden in the spotlight, forcing them to answer to us.
Exactly. And I think also what happens with things like January 6th is a kind of, the smoke arises and a narrative appears, and even we who know that the narrative is false start believing it. So, for example, they wanted to stop the count. Well, no, what was actually going on in January 6th in that building was challenging the election. That was the count that was stopped. It was the challenge that was stopped. So did the people who go into that building, were they trying to stop the challenge? No. The Democrats actually had an incentive to stop the challenges. Mm-hmm. And in fact, the challenges were stopped, because right after January 6th, it's like, okay, let's just go quickly and certify Joe Biden. So now you begin to see that the other side has a motive for having those people in the building.
Yeah.
Yep.
And then
it was a more convoluted fire alarm.
Exactly. So the January 6th committee knows all this, and they're like, listen, we can't let this cat out of the bag. So we need to construct a careful public narrative and make sure everybody signs on the dotted line.
And
they want people thinking about January 6th. They want to keep showing those videos, because every time those videos are shown, no matter what, we know what happened later. But it was not good for the right wing. It was not good for freedom for that to happen.
And what needs to happen is for every anti-establishment media outlet to run nonstop footage and videos of May 29th, when they firebombed the White House.
Yes.
But for some reason...
Yes. Or how about burning down the Minneapolis police station? That was what kicked it all off.
Firebombing the White House.
Yep.
I would say is actually worse.
And attacking that beautiful church.
And the church. They set. So they set. What ended up happening was it was the White House grounds that were firebombed. They set fire to a guard post was torched, and they torched the church across the street. There were thousands of far leftists, hundreds of law enforcement injured, and I guarantee you, if you go to a regular person and ask them about May 29th, they'll say, huh?
Yes, you're absolutely
because
right.
What happens is...
Tim Pool is absolutely right here. 100% spot on. He was also correct in what he said earlier about incidents that seem to disappear from the public eye when the narrative doesn't fit a certain agenda. For example, when a swastika was found on a car in a black neighborhood, it initially caused a stir, but when it turned out that a black man was responsible, the story vanished. The same logic applies to January 6th. If it had been exposed as Antifa members posing as Trump supporters, the media likely would have dropped it instantly. This pattern is also seen with mass shootings. If the perpetrator isn't a straight white male, the coverage often fades, and details, such as the manifesto in the Nashville case, are kept under wraps. The media seems to push a selective narrative portraying straight white male =sign bad while avoiding stories that don't align with that view. Tim Pool nailed it in this debate, but what do you think? Do you agree more with Anne Coulter or Tim? Let me know in the comments what you thought about this fiery Timcast discussion.